Standing at the entrance to the library, the task felt almost impossible. Thousands of books were scattered across the floor, 2 floors of empty shelves surrounded me, and looking across the room, I genuinely had no idea where to begin. Yet somehow, even after several hours had passed, I found myself wishing that there were even more books to put away. Welcome back to the High Court of Games, where I, the Queen of Hearts, judge the games that enter these halls. Some are crowned victorious, and others are sent to the graveyard. Today, Librarian, Tidy Up the Arcane Library, stands before the court for a full trial. Unlike a preliminary hearing where a game is judged based on its early evidence and potential, a full trial occurs after extensive evidence has been gathered or a game has been completed and a final verdict can be delivered. Librarian Tidy Up the Arcane Library describes itself as a single-player simulation. You need to return scattered books to proper places in an arcane library. As completed rows of bookshelves, you learn abilities to improve your efficiency, use your skills and strategies to shelve 3,072 books as quick as you can. And honestly, that description is refreshingly accurate. You put books on shelves. That's the game. No combat. There is no crafting. No saving the world. Just thousands of magical books that need to be returned to their proper place. And somehow it works far better than I expected. What immediately grabbed my attention was the scale of the task. The library isn't slightly messy. It's a disaster. Books are scattered everywhere. The floor is buried beneath them. And at first glance, it feels completely overwhelming. My initial reaction wasn't, how do I optimize this? It was, where on earth do I even start? So I started just picking random books and trying to work out where they went. But I quickly realized that method would just take me forever. So then I started looking for patterns or particular books that would stand out among the piles. For me, it was the white books that stood out first. Then I noticed several of them contained the word philosophy. So naturally, my strategy became find every white philosophy book I can see and hope for the best. Surprisingly, that actually worked. And that's when I realised that the game isn't really about shelving books. It's a giant sorting puzzle disguised as a library simulator. Because figuring out where books belong is often the real challenge. Some titles are obvious, others not so much. When you're holding a book called Prophecy of the Advent of the Great King of Terror, you suddenly find yourself trying to determine whether that's history, religion, divination, mythology, or the diary of someone having a very bad week. As shelves slowly started filling, new abilities began unlocking, and that's when the experience transformed from overwhelming chaos into something incredibly satisfying. One thing I really appreciate is that the game never really forces you into a particular playstyle. If you want to manually shelve every single one of the 3,072 books yourself, you can. If you want to optimize your route and chase a faster completion time, you can do that too. The abilities simply help support whichever approach you prefer. For me, the standout ability was Assemble by far. In fact, I wish I had prioritized it much sooner than I did. The ability starts small, allowing you to call matching books towards you, but as you continue upgrading it, eventually entire series come flying across the library like you're summoning Thor's hammer. It was faster, it was efficient, and honestly, it was just fun. The two abilities that ended up working the best together for me were Shelf Guide and Auto-Shelving, which both work on a timer which you can extend by leveling the abilities up. Shelf Guide highlights exactly where books belong, which became incredibly useful once I started moving quickly through the library. It prevented me from having to constantly go back to the front of the library to check the map. One interesting side effect I noticed was that the more I upgraded this skill, the more focused I became on improving my time and the more reliant I became on it. Eventually, I found myself paying less attention to the names of the books and focusing almost entirely just on the highlighted shelves. And auto-shelving also worked perfectly alongside this ability. If the book was correct, it would instantly slot into place. If it wasn't, nothing happened. It effectively turned it into both a time-saving tool and a built-in error checker if Shelf Guide was on a cooldown and they had to work out where a book went using the map. In fact, both of those abilities actually ended up helping me solve a really strange issue that I had right at the end of my playthrough when a handful of books apparently hadn't registered despite appearing to be in the correct place. Without them, finding the problem probably would have been significantly more annoying. On the other hand, not every ability was equally valuable. Insight was actually the first ability that I had focused on upgrading. It highlights the locations of other books within the same series, which I had genuinely thought was going to be incredibly useful early on when I was trying to hunt down matching books. But as I continued upgrading Assemble, I found myself using Insight less and less. Why should I spend time searching the library for specific books when I could simply make them fly into my hands like little paper Mjolnirs? The minor abilities were a little bit more mixed. Unlike the major abilities which are unlocked by filling shelves, minor abilities are obtained by finding hidden keys throughout the library and using them to open 4 special chests. One of them was genuinely useful, the others less so. Sprint was fine. I used it occasionally, but the difference never felt particularly dramatic. Jump, however, was fantastic. Not because it was necessary, but because it was fun. Being able to launch myself between levels instead of constantly using the stairs saved time and made moving through the library much more enjoyable. There were also 2 carrying capacity upgrades, but I'll be honest, I don't really think they were necessary. I never found myself needing to carry huge numbers of books at once. In fact, I don't think I ever needed even 1 carrying capacity upgrade, let alone 2. Because dropping a book for a moment was hardly a major problem. It's almost like the developers came up with 3 abilities, but because they had 4 chests to fill, they needed 1 more reward. So instead of creating a completely new ability, they simply added a second carrying capacity upgrade. But that being said, I genuinely don't know what other ability they could have added that would still make sense within the mechanics of the game. But I'd love to hear your suggestions in the comments below. If you were designing a brand new ability for the Arcane Library, what would it be? Because personally, I think that there are far more interesting possibilities out there than a second carrying capacity upgrade. Visually, the game deserves a lot of credit as well. This might sound like a strange compliment, but every book actually feels like a book. The covers have personality, the pages have depths, the textures hold up surprisingly well. And despite there being thousands of books, they don't feel like endless copies of the same object. Even when books shared visual similarities, it felt intentional, like collections from the same publisher or author or a series. It's a detail that many players probably wouldn't consciously notice, but if it had been done poorly, they absolutely would have noticed. The music also deserves recognition. The entire experience is accompanied by relaxing, lo-fi style tracks with just enough magical atmosphere to perfectly fit the setting. It's exactly the sort of soundtrack that helps transform what could have been a repetitive task into something genuinely relaxing. My only real I'm over this moment came from the special level. It was a fun idea, but it goes on for a very long time. Specifically, it lasts for the entire length of the song The Blue Danube. And even if you've never listened to classical music before, you've almost certainly heard it. It's that famous waltz that's been used in countless movies and TV shows and cartoons. And while the level itself is enjoyable, by the time the music finally reached its conclusion, I was more than ready for the level to end as well. That being said, it's a relatively minor criticism in an otherwise extremely enjoyable experience, because the more that I played Librarian, the more one thing became clear. This game knows exactly what it wants to be. It doesn't overcomplicate itself. It doesn't try to be something it's not. It simply asks, would organising thousands of magical books be satisfying? And then spends the next several hours proving that the answer is yes. What begins as a mountain of chaos slowly forms into a perfectly organised library. And watching that transformation happen was far more satisfying than I ever expected. After several hours, the books were organised. The shelves were full. The library restored. And despite technically finishing the game, I immediately found myself wanting to go back, to optimise my strategy and try to beat my time. Maybe even attempt a run without using abilities at all, which is probably the strongest endorsement that I can give. So before us today, Librarian Tidy Up the Arcane Library receives the verdict of crowned, because it knows exactly what it wants to be and executes that vision exceptionally well. If today's verdict has convinced you to visit the Arcane Library yourself, you'll find a link to the Steam page in the description below. If you enjoy this review, don't forget to like the video. It lets me know that you're enjoying the High Court of Games and would like to see the series continue. To support the channel, please consider subscribing and ringing the notification bell. I'm currently on a quest to reach my first 1,000 subscribers here on YouTube, and every new adventurer who joins the kingdom brings that milestone a little closer. Thank you so much for accompanying me on the journey. Court's dismissed.